afternoon, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join our webinar. As you can see from our agenda, today's focus will be on providing you with better insight into Oracle's overall audit process, the potential risk factors, common misunderstandings, and how best to be prepared. We're going to cover a lot of information, so we're going to leave questions until the end, but there will definitely be a question and answer period at the end. If you want to go to the next slide.
Nope. Yep, here we are.
Perfect, thank you. So I think I'm familiar with most people on the line, but for those of you who are not familiar with myself, I am Holly Bell, and I am the VP of Enterprise Technology here at DesTech. DesTech was established in 1991, and we are a full solution provider specializing in professional services, technical education, and license sales. Excuse me, we make it our priority to ensure that we are providing the highest level of service to all our customers across all lines of business. And with that, that is why we've partnered with Belay. DesTech has a deep understanding of Oracle technology, deployment models, and product knowledge, as well as insight and a full understanding of Oracle's internal processes. All of this can be leveraged when making net new purchases or considering Oracle technology. Over the last little while, Oracle has taken to auditing customers and making it more commonplace. So as a trusted advisor to our customers, we wanted to ensure that we were able to assist in such situations, and through our partnership with Belay, we are able to do just that. Belay offers a proven methodology to accurately evaluate customer usage against license rights and to provide feedback that allows you to make more informed decisions proactively or during the course of an Oracle audit. Together, DesTech and Belay will help you ensure that you as a customer are prepared for any Oracle license situation. And at this time, I'd like to turn the floor over to Richard.
Thank you, Holly, for this kickoff of the presentation, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Richard Spithoven. I'm one of the managing partners of Belay, and like Holly just said, we are a company that are highly specialized in supporting customers across the globe with their challenges around Oracle licensing in general. My personal background is, together with a whole bunch of my colleagues, is that we've been working at Oracle at the so-called License Management Services team, which is actually the audit team or the compliance department from Oracle that is chartered to perform audits on behalf of Oracle. And like I sometimes say to other customers, I decided to leverage the knowledge and the experience that I gained from 9.5 years performing audits on behalf of Oracle in a large part of EMEA, to turn from the dark side to the good side and to support customers with all that knowledge that we gained over that period of time in order to support them during audits, but also with ULA certifications, support renewals, defining strategies on how to optimize support maintenance renewals where they would want to reduce your cost or to transform customers from on-premise to cloud, and to make them aware of all the nitty-gritty details that they should be aware of in order to avoid and to save costs. Now, today's session, we're really going to focus on Oracle's audits and Oracle's audit practices. And before we're going to make a deep dive, I just wanted to spend some time to talk about the most common misunderstandings and issues that we see across the board. One of them is that a lot of customers that do receive a so-called license review letter or an audit letter are not always aware of the fact that they're actually being formally requested by Oracle to cooperate to provide all their deployment and usage information in order for Oracle to validate what the compliance position is. So sometimes people do not recognize that they're actually being audited because Oracle calls it a license review, or they call it a business review, or they are not very specific around the fact that Oracle actually wants to do an audit, and therefore they just do not take attention or pay attention to the activities that should be done and which you as an end user are required to take care of. Now, what we do see over the last period of time is that Oracle is pumping up their activities rather active by performing more audits out of their back office, for example, in Romania, and also escalating rather quick towards their legal department in case customers are not cooperating within the contractual terms that have been agreed. Because the moment that you're being audited, Oracle actually requires you to start your audit and to provide all the reasonable assistance and access to information within 45 days. And if that's not happening, then escalations towards legal are happening quite often. Now, the other thing that you see is that a lot of people have the perception that because of the fact that they're moving to the cloud, like for example, the Amazon or Azure, the Oracle cloud itself, that they all have a certain perception around, okay, I don't need to think about my license compliance anymore because it's now in the cloud, and the cloud makes everything simple. Well, I can tell you it makes it even more complex, because what you do see is that with all the movements to the cloud, like Amazon, Azure, but also the Oracle cloud, a whole bunch of new terms and conditions have been introduced where customers need to comply with. And what you do see is that Oracle and the other public cloud providers like the Amazons and Azure are highly competitive with each other. So they do change their terms and conditions online on a regular basis. And for example, a customer that deployed Oracle on Amazon a year ago compared to their deployments today in Amazon actually means that, because of Oracle changing the policies and the rules that they have around that customers nowadays need to pay twice as many licenses for their Oracle deployments in Amazon as they had to do a year ago. So moving to the cloud actually doesn't resolve your compliance issues. Actually, it actually makes you even more required to really monitor very closely on what specific terms and conditions you need to comply with. Now, the other thing we quite often see is that a lot of people do underestimate the complexity and the level of detail that you need to look into in order to manage your licenses properly, and therefore they're rather reactive instead of proactive during the course of an audit. And what do I mean with that? Well, when Oracle starts an audit, then the average cycle time of an audit is 3 to 6 months. You do have audits that take 2-3 years. You do have audits that sometimes takes 1.5 to 2 months, but on average it's 3 to 6 months. But what you also should be aware of is that in 98% of the customers that are being audited, Oracle identifies compliance issues. And if you're too late whenever Oracle starts knocking on your door, you therefore typically do not have sufficient time anymore to fix any issues that you may have in your infrastructure that you definitely would want to fix before Oracle finds it out. Because if Oracle finds it out during an audit, you for sure will know one thing: all the data and all the compliance issues that Oracle will find from the data that you shared with them will at a certain moment be used against you. Another thing that we see quite often is that a lot of customers are nowadays more and more looking into software asset management, and they're looking into tools. And Oracle set up a so-called Oracle verification program in which Oracle verified a number of tool vendors, like, for example, Flexera, Aspira SmartTrack. Those are tools that are verified by Oracle. But I can tell you one thing: any tool that you have will never tell you what your real compliance position is. A tool is developed in order to gather the raw data, and the verification program from Oracle actually means that the tool that you've selected, like the Flexeras or the Aspira SmartTracks of this world, do collect the same raw data as that the Oracle audit scripts would collect itself as well. But you never will have a clear view of your compliance position, because it is only focused on the Oracle database programs, and it still does require a lot of information that you need to apply on that data that is being gathered in order to really understand what your compliance position is. And that's why I always say, if you have a tool but you remain a fool, then a fool with a tool remains a fool. So with other words, the tool only just helps you to gather data and to make your data gathering process simple. But in order to understand what you really need to do with it and what your compliance position is and what options you have going forward, you do require the right expertise and knowledge to really have a clear understanding what needs to be done. And last but not least, I already mentioned it before, it's all in the details. So if you do not have a clear view of all your entitlements, meaning your ordering documents, your support renewals, and the associated license agreements, and you do not have a complete and accurate view of how your deployment and usage and configuration of the software actually is, you for sure will be surprised during the course of an audit that Oracle will find stuff. So don't underestimate the level of detail, and make sure that you do have a clear view of what your entitlements and your deployment and usage position is. Now, how to avoid cost, and what about the hidden fees that you have in there? Let's just see what our day-to-day practice is. A lot of customers say, well, Richard, when I talk to a lot of customers, they said, well, my IT team says we're compliant, or we're not using any of those database options or database management packs because we're using only the core Oracle Database Enterprise Edition, or we only use Standard Edition. Or I hear people saying, well, I don't think we have a compliance issue because, we bought the licenses that we needed once we started with the project, and then, yeah, that's what we agreed with Oracle, so that should be fine. Or a lot of people say, yeah, I do have a perfect relationship with Oracle. We made quite some investments in Oracle, and they're not going to audit us, so we don't have any issues. Or they think, well, we have a ULA, an unlimited license agreement, or we're actually thinking of buying an unlimited license agreement, so we can't have any issues. And all those situations we hear quite often because people don't know what they don't know. And that's just the reality. But if you really look in what happens in reality, is that 95% of the end users that are audited by Oracle are found to be non-compliant. And 80% of the end users that are being inspected during a review or an audit actually do pay support maintenance for licenses that they do not use, the so-called shelfware. So on one hand, from a cost avoidance perspective, almost any customer does have hidden compliance issues in their infrastructure. And at the same time, the large amount of customers do actually spend every year money on support maintenance fees for licenses that they're not using. And they typically would want out of it because they would want to ask Oracle to lower the support fees by taking out certain licenses of their support renewals, but then they're stuck with Oracle's recalculation policies. And then Oracle says, hey, yeah, you can terminate those licenses, but actually you're going to continue to pay the same fees that you paid before. So a lot of people are stuck from a cost savings perspective, and they're typically not aware that there is a lot of hidden compliance issues within their estate. Now, where is that coming from? Well, a lot of that is coming from, like I said, people don't know what they don't know. And for example, one of the things that a lot of people are not aware of is that in case you change your hardware infrastructure, for example, you're refreshing your hardware and moving from older servers to new servers with more cores, or you're going to make use of virtualization technologies like VMware or IBM LPARs or Sun Solaris Zones or Oracle VM or Oracle Trusted Partitions. That all those virtualization technologies do have different ways of counting the required number of licenses. And of course, that's very cumbersome for a lot of customers to really understand how to apply what specific licensing rules for what specific virtualization technology. Long story short, all those customers that do change their infrastructure typically do have issues. And why do you think Oracle tries to audit their mid-sized to larger customers every 3-4 years? Simply because Oracle is not stupid. Oracle keeps track of your records and sees if you did any transaction in a period of 3 to 4 years. And they also know that the majority of the customers typically replace their hardware every 3 to 4 years. So if you haven't done a purchase over the last 3 to 4 years, and you most likely have changed your hardware, the risk for an audit is rather high because Oracle knows that you probably do require a different way of licensing than what you purchased a couple of years ago. Now, the other thing what causes a lot of those issues as well is that a lot of the Oracle programs that you download once you purchase the license from Oracle actually do include a lot of separately licensable programs. For example, if you want to download the Oracle Database Enterprise Edition or the Oracle Database Standard Edition, because the download itself for the both editions is actually the same, and you start installing the software, you will see that during the universal installation procedure, you probably will get all the different database options and management packs installed by default. You didn't want that maybe because you only want to have, let's say, a naked database, but you do get partitioning, advanced compression, diagnostic pack, tuning pack, change management pack, etc., etc. You do get all those software components installed, while you only want to have the Oracle database. And you can't actually avoid not installing those options and management packs. So why does Oracle do that? They do that to simplify for you as an end user to start making use of those options and management packs. But what happens quite often, the database administrator that may not be completely aligned on how many licenses have been purchased and what he's actually allowed to make use of or not, thinks, hey, I do have partitioning installed on my database. That's actually a very good feature to actually partition my tables and to really make sure that my performance of my big data warehouse database is actually pretty high. Result, he starts using partitioning, but is he aware of the fact that that is a separate licensable product? Now this and all the other database options and management packs, but also similar for the WebLogic management packs and options like SOA Suite for Oracle Middleware or WebLogic Server Management Pack Enterprise Edition, that is typically found during the course of an audit because people are not aware that these add-ons would need to be licensed separately. And one question, for example, which I see almost across the board happening everywhere, is that a lot of people that are using an Oracle Database Enterprise Edition are not aware of the fact that if they're using a feature which is called data pump, that they need to make sure that they proactively deselect the fact that data pump, while making a data dump, is not going to make use of data pump compression. Because the moment that you do that, which is quite often happening because people are not aware, you're actually triggering a license requirement for advanced compression. And what does that mean? If you've done that once, it remains visible in the Oracle database, and as such will become visible during the course of an audit. So the amount of customers that we do see that actually does require advanced compression licenses, simply because of the fact that they were not aware that by accident they made use of data pump compression while making a data dump with data pump, is extremely high. So that is one of the many examples that we see in our day-to-day practice where is the catch-22 during the course of an audit. Now, how does that then work, or how does an audit actually start? Now, it of course, first of all, starts with an audit clause. And the audit clause is actually part of every single license agreement that you have with Oracle. It's clause O in the Oracle License and Services Agreement, or nowadays, the last 2-3 years, Oracle sells its software on the Oracle Master Agreement. And in that audit clause, it actually says that upon 45 days written notice, Oracle may audit your use of the programs. But let's pause for a moment. What does it actually mean, 45 days? 45 days actually is highly debatable, and in practice should actually mean that the moment that Oracle starts to send you a letter, you have 9 weeks, 9 times 5 days, before the audit can actually start. In reality, it actually means that once Oracle triggers an audit and sends an audit letter, they will ask you to start working with you in 2 weeks. That's the standard terms that Oracle would use in their letters, which actually means that if you are not aware that you actually agreed that they can only start in 9 weeks, and you let them allow to start in 2 weeks as they requested, you're actually losing a lot of time, which is very valuable for you to use to get your ducks in a row and to have a clear understanding of your own situation before you start sharing any data with Oracle. Now, next to that, you see that the audit clause says that you agree to cooperate with Oracle's audit and that you need to provide reasonable assistance and access to information. But what does that mean? It actually means what it says. You need to provide reasonable assistance and access to information. It doesn't mean that, like Oracle would as a standard ask you to do, is to run all kind of scripts on your systems, gather all that data, ship the data over to their back offices in India and Romania, let them do their own data crunching, and then present you with a compliance statement. So be very careful with what data you share with Oracle during the course of an audit, or for that matter, in any engagement, because all the data that you will share with Oracle can and definitely will reveal compliance issues, which will then commercially be used against you. Now, next to that, the audit clause says that you agree to pay within 30 days, and that if you don't do that, that Oracle is able to end your technical support, your licenses, or the agreements. Now, in practice, that never happens, right? So Oracle never ends the support, the licenses, or the agreements. It's more a threat that they typically use in order to push you to commercially resolve that. But what is important to keep in mind is that you, as an end user, contractually agreed that if there is a compliance issue, that Oracle requires you to pay any additional license and support fees that you owe Oracle within 30 days. And why is that a problem? Well, that is a problem because typically I haven't met any customer that actually budgeted money for unlicensed use of software. So typically those financial claims are not budgeted. And therefore, Oracle, because of the fact that you contractually agreed to pay within 30 days, will keep you to that to make sure that within that 30 days period of time, a commercial agreement is being achieved. Now, is that not negotiable? Everything is negotiable, but you need to make sure that you understand what the starting point is before you actually can take the right steps going forward. Last but not least is that the audit clause says that Oracle is not responsible for any cost during the audit. So what does that mean? Even if you are compliant, all the costs that you need to spend in order to collect the information, to gathering the information, to prove that you're correctly licensed, all that money that you need to spend on your internal resources or external resources, for example, from your outsourcing company, are for your own account. So even a compliant customer will have a cost during the course of an audit. Now, how does it then work? Once you are selected for an audit by the License Management Services team, so my previous department where I worked for, they will start actually will be looking at a number of things. So the first thing that they do is they will do their own risk analysis. So the LMS organization does every 3 to 6 months do a risk analysis on the information that they have from you as an end user. They will look at what your last transaction date with Oracle was, what specific type of support tickets you requested towards Oracle, because it can be that you've done that for products that you don't have a license for. They will look at information like the number of employees and the amount of revenue from Dun & Bradstreet to see if you've been growing, because a growing company typically requires more licenses. They will look at if you do have specific contractual terms in your agreement which requires you to report at a certain moment in time. Think, for example, about ULAs. Think about specific agreements where you annually need to report towards Oracle what your consumption is. Now, and based upon around 200 different risk criteria, Oracle LMS makes its list of customers that they select that are targeted for an audit. And roughly around 50%, 40 to 50% of the customers that are being audited are actually selected by the LMS organization. But keep in mind that the Oracle sales organization can nominate you for an audit as well. Because think about situations where your database administrator may be very excited about the fact that he deploys Oracle on VMware, or he's talking about the fact that he's setting up a new disaster recovery environment on a second location. All that kind of information that people from your own organization may share in good faith with Oracle partners or with Oracle sales itself may in the end trigger an audit. Because if the Oracle sales doesn't have a good relationship with you, or he does hear things which he can't really justify why that is happening, the sales guys can nominate you as an end user towards the LMS organization to start an audit. So the dynamic information from your organization and the information from LMS both are being used to select you for an audit, and based upon the risk analysis that is being performed, you either receive an audit letter or not. Now, such an audit letter or notification letter is typically sent to your CIO or your CFO. And is actually there meant to make sure that C-level is informed of the fact that Oracle wants to exercise its contractual right to perform an audit. They do send that to your C-level because they also want to make sure that in case you're not cooperating with the audit, or in case there is any issue, they do have the opportunity to escalate back to the person that has initially been notified of this audit, being your CIO or your CFO. And in the letter, they typically say that you're selected for a license review. And that's what I meant in the beginning, is that not a lot of customers actually do recognize that it actually is the same as an audit. But Oracle calls it a review or a business review simply because of the fact that they do not want to scare people off, saying formally that they're actually starting an audit. So be aware of the fact a review is nothing different than an audit. Oracle just wants to try to call it nicer than it actually is in practice. And of course, the objective of such a review or an audit is for Oracle to validate if you are in compliance, meaning if they are finding opportunities to sell you more licenses. But keep in mind that Oracle also has the opportunity or the objective to try to find opportunities for cross and upsell opportunities. Because don't forget that the information that is being gathered during an audit, like for example, how your Oracle footprint on your HP servers is looking like, that information is very interesting for Oracle to have in order to position, for example, their own hardware solutions, like the Oracle engineered systems, Exadata, Exalogic, Exalytics, or any of the other engineered systems that Oracle has. So apart from validating your compliance, Oracle will, if you do not have the appropriate NDAs in place from the beginning, try to leverage the information that they collect from you during such an audit to identify other cross and upsell opportunities. Now, in the letter that they send to your CIO and your CFO, they will ask for a single point of contact, which is the person within the company that is required to coordinate all the activities with procurement, with database administrators, with hardware infrastructure managers, with business application managers, your outsourcer, your legal department, or any other resource that is required to provide information during the audit. And Oracle will require you to provide one single point of contact and to organize a kickoff meeting or a call in order to discuss the process. Now, part of that kickoff meeting will be what the specific product scope is. And you typically see that the auditors would say, all the Oracle programs are going to be part of the scope. But keep in mind that Oracle sells approximately 30,000 different products and solutions. And therefore, Oracle also doesn't put an audit focus on all those products and solutions that they offer. So as part of an audit, they typically include the following Oracle programs as part of their scope, being the Oracle database, including their options and management packs, the Oracle middleware stack, which includes application server, WebLogic server, and the SoSuite programs, which are the options on top of WebLogic. And then on the right side, you'll see applications like GDAT, Word, Siebel, eBusiness Suite, and PeopleSoft. Hyperion is actually recently being announced to be incorporated into the standard scope from Oracle as well. And why is that? Simply because of the fact that Oracle also knows that the major compliance issues and therefore the financial revenues that they can get out of their audit activities are taking place in those products. So therefore, if you do have any of those products, Oracle knows that they will, during the course of an audit, will have the highest chance of finding compliance issues that they can commercially translate into a new transaction. Now, a lot of people that do make use of Oracle database and middleware programs, or technology programs like Oracle calls them, may consider to deploy the Oracle software on VMware. And you can just Google Oracle and VMware and you will start seeing all the horror stories around how the licensing of that works and what kind of battles Oracle had with other customers that deploy Oracle on VMware. And therefore, the deployment of Oracle on VMware is the #1 compliance issue. Because what a lot of people do not realize themselves is that Oracle requires you to license on a different manner depending on the specific VMware version that you're using. Oracle doesn't allow VMware as a technology to limit the amount of cores that are required to be licensed. So if you look at this example that I show you here on the screen, let's say you have a vCenter 5.0, and that vCenter has a cluster with 2 different hosts, then as long as you're using VMware version 5.0, Oracle requires you to count the number of cores on a cluster level. Why is that? Because the VMware version up to version vSphere 5.0 would only allow a virtual machine to move between physical hosts that are part of a cluster. But with the introduction of VMware version 5.1 and above, the VMware technology makes it possible not to only move a virtual machine that hosts the Oracle software on a cluster level, but actually within the whole vCenter. So in case you have one vCenter with 2 clusters, instead of only licensing the 2 physical servers that are part of this cluster, Oracle requires you to license all the physical cores of all the physical machines that are part of one and the same vCenter. And as of version 6.0, vSphere's version 6.0, it actually becomes even more worse for customers because the VMware technology makes it possible to move a virtual machine from one vCenter to another vCenter. So in this example, if you do have 2 vCenters that are both running VMware vSphere version 6.0 or higher, then Oracle requires you not only to license on a cluster or on a vCenter level, but across vCenter server instances. Those are the standard rules that Oracle applies, and there are ways of getting non-standard language in your agreement to get around that, where Oracle would require you to apply so-called SAN segregation, where they require you to isolate your VMware environment both on a storage and on a network level. But the reality is the majority of the customers are not aware of this licensing practice from Oracle and therefore do end up in compliance discussions if they deploy Oracle on VMware. My recommendation is, whatever your opinion is about if it is fair or not that Oracle applies those licensing rules like that, is that you need to have a clear view of where you are, determine what options you have, and then make sure that you have a proper agreement with Oracle in place to avoid any compliance discussions around that. Now, apart from the VMware issues, there are, of course, many different audits where we have a lot of materials about that we can talk further about, but let's just continue to look at what happens once an audit is actually completed. Now, the moment that the LMS organization is actually completing their audits, the way they then start working is that they will issue a final report, And in that final report, Oracle LMS will make a reference to the so-called compliance policy. And the compliance policy is published online, is actually referring to the audit clause that you actually have in your agreement, and actually says that you need to pay within 30 days. Now, why is that important? That is important to keep in mind because, like I said, the moment the final report is actually being issued, the time starts ticking. And the moment that the LMS team has completed their final report, they will hand over the commercial discussion to your Oracle Sales Account Manager. Now, apart from the fact that the LMS team will explain the findings and they will explain what the financial exposure is that they have identified and that you need to pay within 30 days, they will also explain that Oracle will apply so-called back support fees. Now, what does that mean? Back support fees are actually the support fees that Oracle missed for the period of unlicensed use of the Oracle software that they identified during the audit. So if they found during the audit that you've been using certain programs for the last 5 or 6 years, Oracle will charge the support maintenance fees for the last 5 to 6 years that you actually should have paid towards Oracle if you would have bought the licenses from the moment that you started to use it. And those back support fees can go up rather quickly, simply because of the fact, like I said, a lot of people don't know what they don't know and start to make use of software without being aware of the fact that they actually need to have a license for it. Now, once the LMS team has done their thing, they've showed you the report, they've explained to you the compliance policy, they've explained what the back support fees are, the role play starts. And what I mean with that is the sales guy will come to you and say, hey, I'm so sorry about you that you've been audited. I'm going to be your friend. I'm going to fix it. So the LMS guys continue to be the bad guys, and the sales guys are going to be the good guys, because the good guys will position themselves as the savers that are going to help you to commercially resolve this in the best possible manner. Now, let's have a look on how it actually works and how Oracle uses the different audit activities and the compliance findings that they have in order to move you to the cloud. So let's say you are a customer of Oracle database programs and you've been audited by Oracle. And as a result of the audit, Oracle identifies an issue of 4 processor licenses, Oracle Database Enterprise Edition. Now, for those 4 processor licenses, Oracle would calculate what are the list license and the list support fees, which means that the list license fee for 4 processors would come down to $190K, and the list support fee would come down to $41,800. Now, although the sales guys always say, or typically try to say, that you are not going to receive any discount for a transaction that is there to resolve a non-compliance issue, Oracle at all times is required to apply a discount, even if it is for a compliance transaction. And the discounts are depending on the total volume that you need to purchase. So in this case, because of the volume, a standard discount of 10% is applicable. So your net license fee would be $171,000 and your net support fee would be $37,000. And they would show you a total cost of ownership, a TCO, over 5 years, which means that from a CapEx perspective, in order to resolve the issue, you need to pay $171K over 5 years, and from a support perspective, you would pay over 5 years $199,000. You may ask yourself, why is the support going up year over year over year? That is because Oracle applies as a standard a support indexation of 3 to 4%. So even if you're not doing anything else, Oracle support maintenance fees will grow year over year. So the total cost of ownership over 5 years is $370K. But what the sales guys then will say is that, well, you know, in order to make it more attractive for you, dear customer, because remember, I'm your sales guy and I'm your friend, I'm actually going to see if I can ask approval internally within Oracle in order to give you a higher discount. And instead of the 10% discount that I can offer you, I'm going to offer you 30% discount. But in order to do that, you will need to spend, in my example, $40K on cloud products. Because if I then start to make the TCO calculations over 5 years, I actually am able to show you a better business case, because the total cost of ownership over 5 years would come down to $328, where in my previous example, it would be $370. So dear customer, look how much effort I'm doing for you in order to give you a better deal to commercially resolve the compliance issues that you had. Why am I able to do this as an account manager? Because the major thing in here is that the support maintenance fee that comes in year over year over year over year is always calculated at 22% of the net license fee. So if the discounts are being applied are higher, the support stream coming out of the transaction is lower as well. And of course you would say, well, you know, maybe I'm not even going to use the cloud yet, or well, I'm thinking about doing it. In the end, financially, this is a better deal, so let's go for it. Because if you compare the two to each other, well, in one option, I just pay a total of 370K. In the second option, I need to spend some more on cloud, but in the end, it's more cheaper because I actually need to pay only 328. But the thing which you need to keep in mind in here is that the whole reason why Oracle Sales, of course, puts the cloud into the transaction is because it is more commercially interesting for the sales representative themselves. What do you mean with that, Richard? You may ask yourself. Well, the sales guys are more compensated or heavily compensated in order to sell you cloud instead of on-premise licenses. Because, of course, Oracle, as one big software publisher, needs to show to its stakeholders as well that its cloud revenue should be growing instead of that it is not growing at all. So there is a huge incentive program to the salespeople to sell more clouds. And that's where you see as well, also to keep up with the competition, that Oracle started to introduce its so-called Universal Cloud Credits program approximately half a year ago. So Oracle makes the commercial resolution of an audit more attractive by adding clouds. And in essence, for Oracle Sales, it doesn't really matter if you really start using the cloud, as long as you log in only once. And you may ask yourself, why is that? Well, that is because, let's say, 2 years ago when Oracle really started with the cloud, Oracle Sales was selling cloud everywhere, and a lot of customers were actually not starting to use it. To give you some insights, around 50% of the customers that actually bought cloud programs from Oracle decided after 1 year to not renew their cloud contracts. So it were only financial deals. So what did Oracle do? They made sure that those sales guys were only getting compensated if there was a implementation plan beyond the cloud transaction to show that a customer was really eager to start using the cloud. And only when the customer started to use the cloud, the compensation was going to be paid out towards the Oracle sales guys. Now, if you log in once, there's actually proof of the fact that you're using the cloud. Hence the reason why Oracle Sales is very eager that you log in only once. And that's also why you have, if you've done a cloud transaction, you've received a so-called customer success manager that will encourage you very heavily to make sure that you start making use of the cloud. Of course, as well, to see if you can get add value from the products, but at the same time to make sure that the compensations are being covered correctly. Now, the other thing that you need to be aware of if we're talking about the cloud is that a lot of customers or end users are thinking about, you know, the decision is made, we're transforming to the cloud. But if you don't know what you're using on premise, you also don't know what you actually will need in the cloud. And I can tell you one story that one CFO called me at a certain moment in time and said, Richard, you know, I had Siebel on premise for the last 15 years and I actually decided to move everything to the cloud. So all my applications are moving to the cloud. So I bought Oracle Sales Cloud for 800K a year. But now I have an issue. I said, what's the issue? I said, well, actually, I wanted to make sure that we actually started to use that software. But I now got confronted with the bill of around 1.8 million euros for consulting work in order to make my CRM platform that I had on Siebel work in the Oracle Sales Cloud. And I said, well, what do you mean with that? He said, yeah, because we need to have all those modifications. And I said, well, you know, what you need to be aware of, guys, is that moving from on-premise to the cloud actually means that you're trying to have your on-premise environment that you've been modifying and customizing over the last 10, 15 years, which probably isn't documented in all the detail, that you try to replicate the same functionality in the cloud. That's not the concept of the cloud, because the cloud is going to be to make use as much as possible from the standardized functionalities. And if you are trying to replicate all the modifications and customizations that you've been making over the last 15 to 20 years now simply in the cloud so that you don't have the cost for maintaining your application, then your whole business case of where you thought you were going to save money in terms of transforming to the cloud is actually completely wrong. And that's actually the situation what it is. So I always say, if you don't know what you're using in today's situation on-premise, and you don't know how your current on-premise situation relates to whatever your cloud solution is going to look like, you for sure will be confronted with hidden costs and as such risks going forward. Next to that, what you see is that with all the cloud transactions, and that's not only for Oracle, that's also for other publishers as well, is that a lot of those contracts do have auto-renewal clauses, which means that if you sign up for such a cloud contract, that it may very well be that you actually contractually agree that after a period of 12 months or 24 months, you actually automatically renew unless you specifically terminate your contract. In reality, it means a lot of the times that customers are not aware of the fact that there is such a renewal clause in the contract, and therefore, even if they're not using the product, they continue to pay every year for that fees. Apart from that, if you're really starting to use the cloud, make sure that you really have guaranteed prices of what your consumption in the cloud is going to cost for the next period of time. Because you do see that a lot of customers now are being, let's say, seduced, I would almost say, or made it commercially very attractive to start entering the cloud. So the prices are discounted very high to make sure that the adoption of the cloud is very high and that people do not have a very big step to make in order to start using the cloud. But what are you going to do if Oracle or any other cloud provider is going to double, triple, or even increase the cloud fees even more in a couple of years? What is your cloud exit strategy? Have you thought about it? Is that an option? What does that mean? Those are questions that a lot of customers do not really carefully look into, where they actually should be looking into, because if you do not prepare on what may happen for the future, you know for sure that you will pay the bill at a later moment in time. So what does it actually mean, going back to the example that I just had from a compensation perspective? The initial option that Oracle actually put on the table to resolve the compliance issue was $370K, where the sales guy will be compensated on $171K. But actually, if he would be willing to, or if he can make sure that you as a customer would go for option 2 and include the cloud products in there, he will get compensation will get a higher compensation than what he will get if there is only on-premise license as part of the transaction. But you need to be aware of what the additional fees are going to be in terms of modifications and customizations that may need to be made, additional cloud functionalities that you may initially not be aware of, that you use those functionalities on-premise, and actually you need to move them to the cloud. So although option 2 may sound more attractive from a pure financial perspective, the hidden cost actually can be a big surprise for you as an end user, because they were not taken into account when the evaluation was made, what option was the best option to take. Now, to look a bit into more details around how then the licensing of Oracle in public cloud environments works and how that actually evolved over time, Oracle has specific ways of counting the required number of licenses if you deploy them on public cloud providers like Amazon or Azure, where they actually say, depending on if hyper-threading is enabled or not, 2 virtual CPUs are counted as 1 processor license if hyper-threading is enabled, or 1 virtual CPU is counted as 1 processor license if hyper-threading is not enabled. But this is a rather recent change, because approximately half a year ago, Oracle still said, hey, we're not going to count virtual CPUs, we're actually going to count virtual cores, which may sound almost similar, but in practice it actually means that Oracle increased the prices of the deployments of Oracle on Amazon twice as much as it required initially customers to pay. And therefore you do see that although a lot of customers think, hey, I'm moving from Oracle on-premise to the cloud, to Amazon or to Azure, that because of the fact that they haven't looked into the details and to understand what specific contractual agreements needs to be made with Oracle on how the number of licenses are required to be counted on a virtual core level, on a virtual CPU level, or whatever metric needs to be agreed upon, you are actually setting yourself up into a situation that whenever Oracle changes its policy, you're actually going to pay even more. As a side note, just one customer situation that I had. We had a customer completely moved from on-premise to Amazon. They were correctly licensed under the old policy. Then in January of this year, Oracle changed the licensing terms, and actually the customer required twice as many licenses as they initially bought. Result, Oracle started to knock on their door that they had to pay an additional 1.2 million euros. Was the customer aware of this, and was he anticipating that this was going to happen? Did he budget for this? Absolutely not. So there you see that a lack of understanding of how the licensing rules work in those public cloud providers actually can result in big financial exposures for customers at the later stage. Just an example, how does it work? Where Oracle initially looked at the virtual cores, or where Oracle looks at the virtual cores or the vCPUs, where you always need to look at is the specific instance types that are published by Amazon, and Azure has similar URLs as well, to look at what the number of virtual CPUs are for a specific instance. And then depending on hyperthreading, if hyperthreading enabled, yes or no, based upon that number of virtual CPU, which is depending on the instance type, you can determine how many Oracle licenses you would need to have. But that requires you to continuously monitor that, because Amazon may change that and Oracle may change the policies. Hence the reason why I say that even in the cloud, license management and license compliance or financial exposures may still come up as you go along. Other example to show how it worked under the old policy versus the new policy. Initially, Oracle counted virtual cores, then it started to count virtual CPUs, where you do see that under the old way of counting and the new way of counting, actually Oracle doubled the number of licenses. So be aware of the fact that Oracle will continue to change these kind of policies. Why? Because it supports Oracle's strategy to move customers more away from Amazon or Azure and to make it more attractive to move to the Oracle Cloud. So what is the best solution to get in control yourself? In essence, to be very honest, it is rather simple, but it requires an investment in time, resources, and money to make sure that you start being proactive and take the control yourself. Because if you are not taking the control yourself and you're reactive and you wait until you get audited by Oracle, you're actually a sitting duck where Oracle will find issues, as we've seen from the statistics, and will definitely leverage whatever compliance issues they can find in order to push you more to a new transaction with Oracle. So how can you do that? How can you be proactive? It's rather simple, but it requires, again, investments in time, energy, and resources, because you need to perform internal reviews on a regular basis to determine your compliance position. So, for example, do it every 6 months, do it every year, so that you have a clear view of what your current situation is, that you have the time to mitigate any financial, operational, and legal risks that may be identified in your estate, and that you have an ongoing process with the right expertise in place to manage your licenses properly. And don't forget, the devil is in the detail. So you need to have expertise at hand where you have a complete and accurate overview of your entitlements, the deployment, how you use the software, how you reconcile all of that together, and how you can define a strategy to avoid any costs that may be identified as a result of a compliance issue, and what strategies you can do in order to save costs. So some takeaways for today's session. Make sure that software license management is a priority at C-level, and make sure that you budget for the proper software license management practices which are tailored to the specific needs of your organization. You need to make sure that you have an internal team where the different disciplines from your company, like procurement, legal, database administrators, infrastructure managers, are going to work together with the C-level sponsorship. And with the right expertise in-house or hired externally, you need to make sure that you review and have a clear view of your entitlements, including all your ordering documents, software license agreements, support renewals, support policies, program documentation, and business practice documentation. So you have a clear overview of your entitlements. You need to have a clear view of what your Oracle programs, deployments, and usage actually entails, and reconcile that with the right expertise. So you create a baseline, you understand where you are, you can take the mitigation actions in order to resolve them, and define a strategy to start saving costs. And I can tell you, for those customers where we do this for, where we typically have managed service customers for a period of 3 years, the first year is rather heavy because all the dead bodies will come out of the closet. We need to lift all the contracts. We need to get a complete and accurate view of the deployment and usage of the software. And I can guarantee you almost any customer will have multiple millions of non-compliance. Then the second year, when you do a check, there is a validation to see if all the remediation actions that would need to happen have actually been resolved. And with the right support, you can definitely achieve that. So that you can also define what specific licenses that are on the shelf you want to get rid of from a support perspective, and actually what other choices you may have in order to start reducing your costs. And if you do that on a regular basis, then you will make sure that you're actually not something that you need to be afraid of from Oracle audits, but you will actually start enjoying, because where you always have that risk, you actually are in control and you are able to start cutting costs of your Oracle estate, if that's your strategy, right? So that's my takeaway for today. I leave it up to Holly for a summary overview. Back to you, Holly.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Hopefully that's given some visibility to all of you on the phone, and that you have more insight now than what you came to this webinar with. One of the things that you should remember is that you're not alone in this. We are here to help you. So if there is some questions that you have, if you want to come to us after the fact, and to make sure that you have the ideal licensing for your deployment strategies in place, and that you can ensure that you're properly licensed across the board, so that, as Richard said, if Oracle does come for an audit, you are prepared and you are ready. Again, if you want, what we can do is we can review your licensing in further detail to ensure that you are fully compliant and eliminate any concerns that we might have. We can also help you manage your existing set of licenses and help you to develop future go-forward strategies, either for license procurement or to meet budget demands, or even that of your projects that are up and coming. Following this webinar, I will be sure to send out a copy of the slide deck to all of you. And included within the next slide are actually a couple of links that you can follow through on, and you can feel free to review them and then come back with additional questions should you have any. And I guess at this time, we're going to actually open it up to those of you that do have any questions. Are we going to be able to hear the people, the attendees, or do you want them to go in through the chat?
There were a couple of questions, Holly, and through the chats. One of them was about getting a copy of the deck, which you already answered, so that's good. There were a couple of more, so I can open up the line to the people that ask these questions, so they can ask them live, perhaps.
Perfect.
Yeah, so let's start with F. Seng. Let me just call out the question to see that the rest of the audience is aware of the question as well. So the question is, in our production Oracle database, we have diagnostic licenses. The diagnostic feature is controlled by a parameter control management pack access. We restore the backup of production databases to test QA environments. And the question is, if we turn off diagnostic feature by setting control management pack access to none, do we then need to license diagnostics in our test or QA environment? Turning it off on your production environment as per what you've done is definitely an option. However, what you need to be aware of is that in order to be completely safe, you would probably best truncate the table that keeps the evidence of the fact that diagnostic pack was in use, simply because of the fact that if you don't do that, the historical use of diagnostic pack remains visible in the Oracle database, and therefore Oracle will find that out as well during an audit. If you have done that on your production and you have also made those copies to test and QA, then you should do the same truncate action on your test and QA environment as well, because Oracle requires you to license on any environment that you have, including test, development, QA, disaster recovery, production. So as long as there is evidence of usage of, in this case, diagnostic pack in any environment, all those environments where Oracle will see that historical use, which will require you to license that usage, even if it was historical. So I'm not sure, F. Seng, if that answered your question. I hope that's a yes.
Yeah, silence hopefully means yes.
Okay. Yes. Cool. Thanks for confirming. Then there was another question from Datario. Question 1, is there a change in performance observed with virtual CPUs? I think you refer to the performance from virtual CPUs in Amazon or Azure, or are you referring to Oracle VM?
Yeah, I think it was Azure.
Okay. Yeah, so in terms of Oracle changing their policies with regards to requiring more licenses for the same amount of virtual cores or virtual CPUs being used in Azure, has not so much to do with a performance change, but more from Oracle from a strategic perspective to make the deployments of Oracle on Amazon and Azure more expensive compared to their own Oracle Cloud solution. But what I do know from a lot of clients is that if they start deploying Oracle on Azure or on Amazon, is that the I/O loads that they were initially having on premise is actually not on that level as what they were expecting in Azure and in Amazon. Meaning that they actually need to have bigger instances or more virtual CPUs in order to cover that I/O load. So a lot of customers are actually now having challenges because they initially anticipated a certain amount of virtual CPUs in either Amazon or Azure, and then from a licensing perspective covered up for that. But now when they start loading on Amazon and Azure, they actually realize that they sometimes need to increase 2 times the amount of virtual CPUs that they initially thought because of the I/O loads.
Mm-hmm. I think we also observe this on Linux and Solaris server as well. So the setup
Yes.
of Solaris server is different, and the setup of Linux for core count is different.
Correct. So, well, to be a bit more precise, if we're talking about Sun Solaris, Sun Solaris is, of course, an operating system that became part of Oracle's portfolio since the acquisition of Sun Microsystem. And from a licensing perspective, Oracle actually has a so-called server partitioning policy, where they do say that they do allow Sun Solaris zones or containers, as they were called in the past, as a technology that can be used to limit the amount of cores that are required to be licensed. So, for example, if you would have a physical server with 10 cores, just to keep it simple, and you would create a zone or a pool of 4 cores where the Oracle software is deployed upon, then Oracle does allow such a zone as a technology to limit the amount of cores that are required to be licensed. So, with other words, for example, you would only need to license 4 cores instead of the full capacity of the server being 10 cores. So Oracle has different ways of counting depending on the specific virtualization technologies that are being used. For example, for IBM LPARS, it's again different because if you have LPARS logical partitions from IBM, then it really is depending if such an LPAR is capped or uncapped, and if it is capped, what the entitled capacity is of such an LPAR, or if it is uncapped, if such an LPAR is part of a specific pool, of course, and what then the active number of CPUs or online virtual CPUs in the pool are. And all those parameters then determine how many licenses you would need to have for an IBM LPAR environment. So to make it very simple, Oracle makes it rather complex on the fact that you have different ways of counting depending on the virtualization technologies being used. And there, it's not only about the virtualization technology itself, but also how the virtual servers are configured, which determines how many licenses you would then need to have for the different deployments. And that's where you see, apart from, for example, VMware, which of course is the major one, but there you see as well a lot of the issues coming from because, yeah, it is written on documentation, but you really need to be aware of how all those different licensing rules work for those different technologies to really apply that correctly.
Can you do one favor? This is very, very important for us to know, and thank you so much for sharing this. When you share the deck, can you add these questions and your inputs as well? It will be very helpful for review again and again whenever we are stuck with this question.
Yeah, sure. So what I otherwise would suggest to do, because
a separate question and answer, something like that, that will also be
helpful. Or drop Holly or myself an email, and then we can follow up on that separately, because I can push a lot of information to everybody, but I don't want to spam everybody.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, true.
What I'll do is I'll start a conversation with you offline, and then we can follow up directly with some information. I have some documentation that I can send you around hard partitioning as well, and Oracle's visibility on that and what their viewpoint is, so we can make sure that we get the right information out to the right people.
Yeah. Sorry, I need to jump in another call now. They are waiting for me for the past 4 minutes. Sorry, I'm going to drop off.
No
No
worries.
worries.
Thanks for
Thank you so
joining.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let me see. I don't see any other questions, I think, in the Q&A box. Are there any other questions from anyone that is still on the line?
Okay, well, if there's any follow-up questions that anybody comes up with after the presentation is closed, by all means, you can send them to me directly, and we can schedule a follow-up meeting if necessary to talk about one-on-one issues as needed. But if not, I hope you've all enjoyed the presentation today, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.